How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today, I'm going to be doing an overview on all of these trade paperbacks that have come out or coming out from Dark Horse Comics soon. So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, before getting started, I do want to thank the folks at Dark Horse for sending us copies of these books. All of these books are already out in the direct market and book market or coming out soon. So we've got a lot to talk about, and normally you all know how long I like to keep talking about books. This time around, though, we do have to go through these pretty quick. So I'll be giving you the pitch and then showing off some of the artwork. Before going any further, please don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. And thank you to all you folks that have done that in the past. Really means a lot to us. All right. In the description of the video is where you're going to find each of the books with the timestamps in case you're only interested in a couple of them or just one or all of them. Doesn't matter. But let's go ahead and start with... let's do Elixir. So here we have Elixir, and this is Volume 1. I don't know if there's going to be any more. This book was really interesting to kick off this particular batch of books, and it's going to be really hard to put a seal of approval on just one book. I hate that I limit myself to that. This is written by Frank Barbary and Rick Mamone, and the art is done by Victor Santos, letters by Frank Barbary again, and the logo design is by Sasha E. Head. The era of magic has come to an end. Technology flourishes in the modern world, but not all have moved on. The druids hold on to old magic. Okay, I said I was going to take a short time. The basic premise of this is that the druids are holding on to the past, and they want nothing to do with technology. And there's a certain item, a MacGuffin, if you will, that they have to go and retrieve. So they send the daughter of the druid leader, Mara, this young lady right here. She's with her friend Lorelei. Maybe they're more than friends. To go and recover this elixir that will restore magic everywhere. But one of the things that she has to do is she has to face her old teacher, Claude. So the reason she's doing this is because she's been promised something by her mother, who's in charge of the druids. She's been promised something that she lost a long time ago. And the only way to retrieve it is if she unleashes this elixir in the world and returns it to her. So does she side with Claude, her old mentor, her old teacher, or does she retrieve this elixir and bring it back to her mother and the druids? And who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what will happen to technology? I love this artwork, the color tones. This really reminds me of Darwin Cook's art, especially with these colors in the pages of Parker. I think it's an amazing read and definitely one that people should not sleep on. It says a volume 1, but it feels like it ends. I mean, I guess there could be more to see what ends up happening to some of these characters. The book is $19.99 and it has 128 pages. And as far as the extras, there are no extras. So there we go. We're looking at a book that just goes from cover to cover. It was a quick read, but one I could not put down. And this was a lot of fun. I like stories like this. You know, it's got that Final Fantasy element, but it's a lot gritty, like Sin City, if you will. And you get to find out about these characters through a series of flashbacks. And who is Rachel, and when it ended up happening to her? But that is Elixir. Joe Death and the Graven Image by Benjamin Shipper. This is the first book I've read by Benjamin Shipper, and I know nothing about it going in because of the back. Usually they explain things, but I don't really read the back of books because I like to be surprised. What intrigued me was the cover. It's got this, my kids and I love playing Cuphead, so it's got this old school cartoony feel to it with a little bit of Magnolia flair. And that's what the cover did for me. When I opened the book, I had no idea what was gonna happen. I had no idea what I was installed for. And it was one that I read, and I had forgotten certain plot points. And I kept coming back to it. I'm like, oh, that's right. So the basic premise of this is that we meet Joe Death. He's kind of like the Grim Reaper. He's the character at the front here. And he's going from town to town. And he meets these town folks that unfortunately most of them are killed and a baby's being kidnapped by a witch. So now it's up to him to go and retrieve this baby. That plot, the premise does not do this book justice. This is an insane trip. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, this was an insane, amazing trip. I had a blast. But I'm not going to lie. I read this about a month and a half ago, and I had to come back and revisit the book because I had forgotten some things that had happened. And I wanted to do the pitch justice. But the pitch doesn't do the story justice. It's one of those books that's an experience that you have to experience it for yourself. And I've used that term before to talk about certain stories. There's certain stories that stick with you. There's certain characters that you end up loving, that you want to go back and revisit. And then there's stories that you experience. And it's a different type of reading. It's a different type of level that you're entering when you're experiencing books like this. And that's what I enjoyed about it. Yes, you forget about the kidnapped baby because he goes through all these trials in this weird, amazing world that I would love to see in a video game. If Shipper was not doing comics, he should be doing video games. I even forgot to talk about his little insect buddy that lives within him, like on his shoulder. He has his own little house. But most people also have little insects. Things like that are just not explained, and that's what I enjoyed about this book so much. It's a mix between creepy and goofy. There's twists and turns, and you have this atmospheric world building, because not only is it the pictures that are doing the world building, but you have this inner monologue that kind of is disguised as dialogue. I love the way they talk. Look at this. This is amazing. I love to see this in oversized format. Now, at the very end, because I do have to talk about this, like, he puts a lot of his heart and soul into this book. So much so that there is a letter from him. I can't show it because it's the final page. But he talks about the importance of independent comics and how much it would mean for people to pick up this book. Don't sleep on this book, because I think, in time, this is a book that people will keep coming back to. I definitely recommend it. And it doesn't say volume 1, but I feel like there's more to this story that he wants to tell. It's a weird experience, but be prepared for that. But definitely worth reading and making up your own mind about it. And that is Joe Death and the Graven Image. And then we have stories like this that are easy to describe. This is Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot. This is the latest printing. And with the latest printing, there is a new cover. You have this amazing cover. And we do have, it looks like new colors. I cannot find my hardcovers anywhere. My hardcovers, like, there is a box of hardcovers I can't find. But it did have Rusty and the Boy Robot, or Rusty the Boy Robot and Big Guy. So this is a love letter, and I feel like it's more of a love letter from Jeff Darrow, even though I know that Frank Miller is a big fan of samurai movies and anime, and of course that European style of storytelling and graphic novel format. But Jeff Darrow just came in here, and this is their second work together. We'll be talking about their first work in a little bit. And he's a fan of Atom Boy, Astro Boy, and Tetsujin 28, which is, of course, Gigantor here in America. Now, because the title is a little misleading, and I forget about this every single time, because the title is Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot, it's not like both of them are teaming up like in the cartoon, if you all remember that cartoon from the 90s. They do team up eventually, but it's basically their own separate adventures. And it's such a, I almost want to say a kid-like book, but there's so much over-the-top violence. I just freaking love it. Here's the extra story in the back, and then we have the pinup gallery. So this book has a lot of pinup galleries. And I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, these are new colors, because I don't remember the colors looking this stunning, if you will. There's a certain nostalgia with the original colors, and the same can be said about the next book I'm going to be showing. So this is the latest printing. This collects Big Guy and Rusty, the Boy Robot 1 and 2, and then this 9-page story right here from Dark Horse Presents 3, number 1. So I talked a little bit about this one when I was talking about Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot, and this is their first work together. This is Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow. This does have a new color, though. This is done by Dave Stewart. Now, I do remember this one a little bit more because I used to have the big oversized hardcover of this one. This is a lot different than Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot because this is a lot more violent. It's got some sexual tones in here. And it is just insane. And I mean, if you've never read it, you really need to read it and experience this book if you can stomach those things. This is our about Carl. He's an insurance investigator, a tax guy, and it's one thing after another nonstop. Like, you have a berserker that's going after him. Who is he? The tax collector. And they're going across the city, just causing a complete rampage. It reminds me a lot of the Katsuhiro Otomo story, Rojin Z. But again, it's so weird to describe this type of story because so much happens through here. You have a bunch of robot killing machines through these stories. And this is Jeff Darrow, the same gentleman that gave us Shaolin Cowboy. But this is him teaming up with Frank Miller, and it's just one thing after another. It feels like an adult version of a summer blockbuster with all the nudity and the sex and the freaking, like, 80s summer blockbuster, if you will, and violence, over the top violence. And yes, if you can't stomach things like Hard Goodbye, Sin City, then you may want to pass on this one. This one gets a little nuts. Don't let this cartoony artwork fool you. I mean, it is graphic and amazing at the same time, and you get insanity like that. All the way in the back, you get recommended reading. Not as many pinups or covers like the previous book, the Big Guy book. But this is the type of artwork. If you haven't read it and you're a fan of Shaolin Cowboy, pick these up because they are back in print now. Red Tag. Now, this is labeled as Season 1 in the Comixology. So this is a Comixology original. And there's some familiar names here for people that have been following comics, not just for a long time, but recently. You have Rafael Albuquerque, Rafael Scavone, and Roger Cruz are the creative team behind this. And this is a really interesting take on the political system that's going on, all taking place, by the way, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in 2018. So we meet a group of three friends, Liz, Lou, and Leco. And they're a bunch of taggers. They go around and spray paint. The street art is called Pixo. So what ends up happening is during one of these things, they tag one of the politicians and take his cell phone. What they don't know is there's this whole corrupt government movement to take out the current people that are running for president. And when his phone gets taken, they kind of get caught in the middle of this conspiracy. And the people that are after the phone send out a bunch of killers to go after these kids. They don't know the kids have the phone of this politician, but they know they're out there somewhere. So this is a really interesting read. It's one of those, oh man, how are these kids going to get away with it? We have professional killers going after them. It's definitely a fast read. It's a fast-paced read that I really enjoyed. And it's all, I guess it all originally came out in Comixology, but this is the way that I read it. This book has 136 pages and retails for $22.99. And I do have to, I said I would go through these quick, but I do have to talk about Roger Cruz. Roger Cruz was an artist that's been around since the 90s from Brazil. And I know that for the most part, like, people remember him as having a Joe Madureira style or a Jim Lee style, and never developing his own style. But by now, he's developed his own style. I mean, if you look at the art here, especially with these wonderful colors, they're just solid. Good flow of panels, easy to follow action sequences. Yeah. He has become a solid artist. In the back is where you're going to find the cover gallery. So here's all the covers, and then you have some character concept art as the extras. Not just for the kids, but also the higher contracts that are going after them. And then the behind the scenes of the coloring. A little bit about the creators right here. And then other Comixology books printed by Dark Horse. I do love the idea of Dark Horse printing these Comixology originals. Blab. Oh my gosh. This thing is amazing. This is another book. I swear. Yeah. I'm not putting the seal of approval on it. I'm just letting people know not to miss out on it. So what Blab is this really interesting project. It's like a magazine, like an old school, and it's even done in an old school style. Magazine brought by all these wonderful creators. So you have different stories in here, but the price of admission is the Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster story that starts on page 9. But before we look at that, let me give you I just said before we look at that, a quick glimpse as to what you're going to get in here. Oh, you're going to get the evolution of the man-ape, like the gorillas in the movies and in the comics, why they took over. So artwork like this, ads like this is such a really cool project. And done in a really interesting style. And you have these French flaps too, which is nice. It's not a hardcover, it's a soft cover, but you have like French flaps right there. It's a very cool book, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, so let's talk about this. This is the story of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And be prepared to be pissed off. This is talking about how they fought for years for the rights of Superman, how lawyers got involved, how greedy people got involved, how much they ended up. I mean, be prepared for what used to happen. And, you know, we talk about these things happening now because you see people come forward and are like, hey, I didn't make any money from this, and my character appeared in a Marvel movie or a DC movie. It was a lot worse back then. If you don't believe me, just look up who Bill Finger was. But they were the ones that brought attention to the whole, you know, you're making money off of the characters that we created. I think we're owed a little something. And I'm not talking about thousands of dollars. I'm talking about millions of dollars. You're making money for these TV shows, all the radio programs, and eventually the movies in the 80s. And there's this whole history behind it. And it's amazing how much was able to be done in just a few pages. Very, very, very well done by Ryan Heshka. It's like the rise and fall of Superman's creators, pretty much. And man, even though you may know this story already and you've heard about it, it's definitely worth checking out just for that alone. This book retails for $19.99, and it has 112 pages. And it's just a nice trip down, or a nice walk down memory lane, if you will. Or if you ever want to experience those Golden Age type of stories. And it is printed in this thick, glossy paper, so don't be fooled when you saw pages like this that it might have been matte paper. But it's not high gloss, but it's still glossy paper. Shock Shop. This is a really cool treat because you may have seen it in the thumbnail, and I did it on purpose. In the thumbnail, I had it like this, upside down. But it's because it's got a flip story. And I'm sure the comic was printed like this. This collects the first 4 issues of Shock Shop, all by Cullen Bunn, or written by Cullen Bunn, I'm sorry. Drawn by several folks. Danny Luckert doing the first one here. And we have our own Cousin Eerie, the Crypt Keeper, Elvira, and this lady is nice to look at. This is Desdemona Nemu Moriu, which I'm sure I'm butchering her name, but she is your host. She introduces us to these horror stories. Now, there's 4 issues in here, but there's only 2 stories. There's Something in the Woods in the Dark. That's one of them, and it's all about this husband and this wife that go hiking, and they're going through a tough time. This hiking trip with friends is going to make them forget about things, but they go into this weird section of the woods where they start encountering supernatural things. And it's dark and creepy, and it's okay. It's what you expect from Cullen Bunn. The artwork is absolutely stunning, though. I really like it. I think this is the Regeneration artist, and each issue is introduced by this young lady right here, who has that skeleton hand. All right, but when you get to the middle, after the story's done, you get other stories from Tyler Crook and Cullen Bunn, like Harrow County. She warns you that you're reading this the wrong way. Flip it over and start another hair-raising story. This time you have her on the cover. And I like this one more. This is called Familiars. So we meet this character named Trevor here. This one's drawn by Layla Lace. So Trevor has recently divorced. He's fighting custody for his kids. His ex-wife is already seeing somebody, and he moves into this house. This house is being haunted by familiars or poltergeist. You don't know exactly where they stand. They seem to be helping him out. The familiars or the ghosts seem to be playing with the kids and getting along with the family. But then it gets into some dark territory, and you start wondering, wait a minute, what side are these creatures on to begin with? Are they just using Trevor and the kids to lure people to the house? So yes, I really like this. It kind of reminded me of those Tales from the Crypt or maybe even a Masters of Horror type of story, but loved it. I thought it was great, and I can't wait to see more of these collections. I'm a big fan of anthologies, as you'll see here in a little bit. So before we go any further, though, let's check out the spines. And now we have come to that time of the video where we're looking at all the spines. I'm sure you saw these earlier at the very beginning, but just in case, here's a reminder. This is the way they would all look on your shelf. And also a reminder to hit that like button. Please, that goes a long way for us, and it's a very small thing you can do. Alright, let's keep going with the overviews. Joyama Volume 2. I know for sure this is one of the few that isn't out yet. I believe it comes out June 13th. Depending on when I put the video out, you may already have it out in stores. This one retails for $19.99, and it has 200 pages. It is all done by Daniel Isles, or Isles? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He's the gentleman that worked on Mr. Miracle for DC Comics. He did a Mr. Miracle comic. But how do I explain my love of this title? If I didn't give my seal of approval to Joyama Volume 1 last year, because we're getting one volume a year, we're getting Volume 3 next year too, I should have. Because this is so good. Because in the first one you meet the characters. But before we even talk about the characters, let me just show you a little bit of this amazing artwork. Like, how this works. I love that he did the same thing in the first one. So we start with this panel right here of this lady hanging up some clothes to dry, and then we zoom out and we see where she is exactly, and we see exactly how big the city is. I love these type of layouts when it comes to panels, the zooming out motion, very cinematic, and you see just exactly how big it is while you're learning a little bit about the city and the Outriders, which we met in the first book. Look at that, and then the title. Man, that is so good. It is so solid, and the art style is all done in this black and white with a little bit of tones here, the grayish tones. So in the first book, we met Ringo, who's here with us, Arwen, and Silas. And they're all members of the elite guard known as, or I guess they're more of a squad known as the Outrider Soldiers. And they're pretty much contracted by people and government officials to pretty much shake down any kind of crime. Well, something horrible happens in the first book, and they're all kind of separated, and I can't get into spoilers because it would spoil the first book, just mainly focusing on this artwork. So, we are now seeing Ringo team up with a younger girl that we met in the first book, and that is Ruby. So, with their two missing teammates, they do have somebody new. And it is this gentleman right here. This is Max. I love the way he's drawn too. Max Drudo King. He always stands above them, but there he is right there. Who's this big muscle-bound guy. Oh, it kind of reminds me of the joke in, what is it? Naked Gun, with the tall guy that's always shot like this, where you see Leslie Nielsen and the rest of the characters, but you never see the guy's head. You do see his head, though. And now we're exploring the world more. Like, we moved on since Black Cotton. Black Cotton is still a thing, and the book will remind you, because they're still planning their revenge on Black Cotton. But we meet some more key players through here, like the House of Vipers. We meet Kuno right here, who plays a bigger part in this. And I think I said this with the first volume. I never go back and rewatch my videos, but I think with the first volume I compared this to Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira. And that's the way it feels. It's not as detailed, of course. It is definitely a one-man show working on this, but it is amazing what he's able to do. And now that Ruby's with Ringo, she's become more of a badass. She's an official Outrider assistant. And how she's going to manage to live through here, and what ends up happening to at the end of here, and where are the other characters? Where are Arwen and Silas? Well, if you read the first one, you should know where one of them is. But the other one's been missing, so where are they exactly? Wonderful read, and I cannot wait for Volume 3. 1. Elephantmen 2261 Omnibus Volume 1. is finally out. So, a follow-up to the Elephantmen series that was previously published by Image Comics. I'm not sure if they're going to reprint them over at Dark Horse or not, by Richard Starkins. And big shout out to my buddy Thomas Judge, who sent me those first 2 volumes years ago. And I remember finally around getting to read them, and I regretted not reading them sooner. So this is a follow-up to that series that were originally published through, you should see it here, Comixology. So this is known as Season 1 and 2. So there's 2 books collected in here. Part 1 is called The Death of Shorty, so that's a little bit of a spoiler, and you wonder why we have to burn and cut you. So it does a really good job explaining what Elephantmen are, in case you've never read it. And honestly, you don't need to have read any previous Elephantmen book, but you'll want to after reading this, because it's so good. I forgot how good the dialogue is. So here we meet a group of Elephantmen that are in war. They're trying to avenge the death of their comrades, and they're finding out who exactly killed these Elephantmen. So Elephantmen, by the way, are a breed of animal and human breed hybrids that were made for this big war that happened a long time ago. And now that the war is over, they're living amongst humans. That's all you really need to know. So the first part of this is all about this gentleman right here, Shorty, who gets caught up in this trap by this human and gets hurt. And I mean hurt. He gets his trunk cut off, his tusk cut off, and it was kind of an irony that they called him Shorty because how long his tusks were. So later on, we get the return of 2 of the best characters, and that is, of course, these 2 right here. And this is Jack Farrell and his partner, Hip Flask. So these were the characters in Elephantmen, and they're investigating the death of Shorty. So that's not what killed him. Apparently he died in his sleep. And they're introduced to this, it's kind of a smart-ass robot right here. This is Dylan. So they're trying to find out exactly who killed Shorty. And it's the whodunit type of story. Freaking awesome. Twists and turns everywhere. Let's look at the second story. Book 2, The Pentaline Job. When time moves us away from the Holocaust of war, people always forget. And I forgot to mention the art in here. You know, the story's by Richard Starkins, but the art is by Axel Medellin. And oh my gosh, it's so solid. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that Ian Churchill without the inks. So the second story here, again, we see Hip Flask and Jack and Dylan. They're back together again. And in this adventure, it's a little bit different. So this is a little bit of a heist story, if you will. And you have a holiday. I think there's a holiday special at the end of this book, too. If I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I've read so many of these. I think this one. Yes, there is a holiday special here. Man, these are some awesome stories, and I'm glad to see it find a home at Dark Horse. Hopefully we'll get some reprints of the older stuff, and hopefully they'll be in hardcover format. And this is dedicated to Tim Sell, 1956 to 2022. And the colors are by Boo Cook, who surprised a lot of the colors in here, if not all of them. But that is Elephantmen 2261. The World of Black Hammer, Volume 1. Now it's coming out in trade paperback format. It's been available in library edition. This collects the Sherlock Frankenstein and Legion of Evil, and Dr. Andromeda and the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. Okay. Without going into spoilers, if you've not read Black Hammer, do you need to? This is a spin-off title that happens in between volumes 1 and 2 of the library editions, or I guess volumes 1 and 2 of the omnibus editions. It would help. How about that? So here we meet the daughter of Black Hammer, and she is searching for her father because she thinks her father is lost out there somewhere, and she's obsessed with finding her father. So during, I believe, this all starts off 10 years ago with her being a little girl, remembering her father, people in school picking on her. And then we get like 8 years ago, 6 years ago, and we get to 2 years ago where she meets Dr. Andromeda. And he tells Lucy that her father is still out there somewhere. So she's like, okay, I'm going to find him. I'm going to find my father. So she becomes obsessed with finding her father, and she gets a message from him saying, if you're watching this, it means I'm dead, but she still refuses to believe that her father's dead. So her only chance of finding him is finding one of the biggest arch nemesis, which is kind of like their Lex Luthor. If you don't know much about Black Hammer, it's a love letter to Silver Age superheroes, classic superhero storytelling. So there's a lot of homages, including the villains too. And Sherlock Frankenstein's nice picture right here by Mike Mignola is kind of like their Lex Luthor. So Lucy Weber goes on a journey to try to find him, and because if she can find him, maybe they can find her father and the rest of the heroes that disappeared. So that's the first story in here. There are two. And the first one is drawn by David Rubin. And there's the Cthulhu story in here as well. But the next story, drawn by Max Fiumara, is the Dr. Andromeda in the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. If you've not read this before, be prepared for Jeff Lemire to take your heart and crush it and slam it into the ground and stomp on it, because that's how it feels to read this beautiful story about Dr. Andromeda being obsessed with finding the stars. And it's a flashback of his life, how he got the powers and how he eventually made it to the stars. But each trip would take a toll on him. Sometimes he would be gone for what seems minutes of his life, and he'd been gone years from his Earth. So we meet his wife right here. This is Joan, and their son, Charlie. And as you'll see through here, he gets more and more obsessed with finding the stars and eventually, becoming a superhero. But each time he goes on a mission, it takes time away from his family. And this is the only one that I might say, minor spoilers in, just in case you want to read it for yourself. But the big part of the story is that, yes, he misses time with his son, so much so that even though he's been gone for minutes, he's been gone 18, 22 years away from his son and his wife. And at one point, his son becomes older than him. So the premise of this is how he has a son that's dying of cancer, an old man, and now he has to make up for lost time, and now he has to find a cure. Now he wants to save his son because he feels like he's wasted time being a superhero. And oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And that ending will rip your heart out, like I said. There are no words. It's a beautiful story. 256 pages. This one retails for $29.99. And that is The World of Black Hammer, Volume 1. We'll be getting the rest, I'm sure, in this format as well. The Omnibus format. Creepy Archives, Volume 1. Now we're looking at the trade paperback editions of these. They're $24.99, much like the EC Archives that were printed originally in hardcover. They are now coming out with Creepy and Eerie in softcover. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, this book right here gets the near mint condition seal of approval. If you've not read it, if you're at all interested in horror and you want to go back to those classic 60s stories of anthologies, look no further than this. Oh my gosh, this is Warren Magazine's books being published in chronological order, but it doesn't matter. You can skip around. It's not like one issue connects to the next one. You have an introduction here by John B. Cook, and here we go with Creepy number 1, where we're introduced to our host, and that is Uncle Creepy. There's also Cousin Eerie. He's the host of Eerie Magazine. But everything is collected in here. And yes, it's black and white. I know some of my viewers can't do black and white, and I respect that. But boy, are you guys missing out on some amazing stories. It's not just horror. There is a little bit of sci-fi and fantasy in here. Not a little bit. There's a lot of Uncanny Omar talked pretty one day. Fantasy and sci-fi in here. And stories range from, somebody getting their comeuppance, different times, and oh my gosh, it's so good. If you're familiar at all with the story of Jennifer by Bruce Jones that was turned into an episode of Masters of Horror, this is where it originated from. Not from this volume, but from these type of stories. The ads are in here. The ridiculous mock ads are in here. The covers are all done in full color. That is one of my favorite covers because I remember seeing this at a comic book store as a kid, and it creeped the hell out of me. I was like, I don't want any business with that dude right there. But these are printed in magazine size. So, meaning the trim size of these books are like magazines, bigger than your trade paperbacks. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, in soft cover. But if you missed out on the hardcovers. They are really hard to find, and they get really expensive because they've been out of print for a while. Definitely think about investing in the paperbacks because they're continuing the line now, and they're focusing on the trade paperbacks. As some of us that have been collecting these type of books from Dark Horse, we know once they shift the focus to a paperback, they hardly ever reprint any hardcovers. I mean, I still hope they do, but it would take a lot for them to reprint these books. Phenomenal stories. Archie Goodwin was the editor here. A lot of the creators that you're going to meet or you're going to see through here eventually went and moved on to the big two, but this is where they got their start. I mean, we have a cover by Frank Frazetta. We have lots of covers by Frank Frazetta. You have Archie Goodwin. Like, it's just crazy to see some of these names that appear through these pages, like Gray Morrow, Jack Davis, George Orlando, George Evans, and Frank Frazetta. So do yourself a favor. If you've never checked it out, definitely worth checking out. The book has 248 pages and retails for $24.99. Out of all the books that I've read this particular 2 months, it's how long I've been reading these back and forth, this is the one that I kept going back to because it was just so text heavy, especially when there's a prose book in here. I'll show you what I mean. So this is the final Grendel Omnibus, and it's called Prime. And here's the spine right here, which we saw earlier. And it features a new Grendel, just like the rest of the Grendels. Now, before I go any further, this book has 44 pages, and it retails for $29.99. And it's huge, and it collects War Child, Past Prime, Devil Guest, a Grendel Primer, and then I think those are just pictures, though. So it collects the original stories that were supposed to be published by Comico, but then Comico folded. That's what the War Child is. I think it's 41 through 50 is what they were supposed to be. And then eventually, when he brought it over to Dark Horse, he printed it there. So in here, we meet a couple of new characters. We meet Jupiter, who's the son of Odin, and Odin is no longer around during this particular time, and he's being kidnapped from his home. He's being kidnapped by what we think is a Grendel, but it's somebody that calls himself a paladin. So everybody keeps calling him a paladin. Eventually, you'll see him adopt the name Grendel Prime, which is the name of this omnibus right here. So for 10 issues, we get to know these two characters, Jupiter and Grendel. We get to see the corruption of the government. We get to see why exactly he was being kidnapped and what role Laurel Kennedy, the widow of Orion, has to play along with this. Why she wants the child, why she wants to manipulate her daughter to become the heir, even though her daughter is already in love with somebody. She wants her married off. And what part this Grendel Prime has to play in all of this. I really liked this story. I was excited to see where it went because of, liking the characters, and then we get a follow-up. And in this follow-up, it's written by Greg Rucka, but it's all done in a prose novel type of way. You get artwork by Matt Wagner, which is awesome, to see him come back, but it's a prose, and I don't have anything wrong with prose novels. I think it's awesome, but I think sometimes I have to be prepared to read them, and it kind of took me by surprise that there was going to be one in here, because a lot of these stories I've never read before. So this all tells the future adventures of Grendel Prime and another character named Susan after a big event. So definitely don't read this unless you've read The War Child. It's a big prose too. All right, and then the book that's collected in here, the last one, is The Devil Quest. And this is all written and painted by Matt Wagner. Richard Starkings of Elephantmen, and a phenomenal letterer, is doing the lettering for here. Now, this all takes place about 100 or so years after The War Child. And these are all from backup stories, I think, is what, at least that's the way they feel. Like they were backup stories that are collected all in one sitting. And this featured the character of Grendel, Grendel Khan. So you get to see a little bit of what happened back here through these pages for some of those missing story arcs from these from the War Child. All the way in the back is where you see the Grendel primer, and it's just an alphabet. Okay, it's an alphabet. Nice. Hey, let me No nips, so I don't think I had to cover that up. And then a little bit about the author. Now, there is also Grendel in Space, which is not collected in anything. And also, of course, Batman Grendel. There were two of those that I don't think have been collected outside of the older trade paperbacks and haven't been collected in the Omnibus edition either. Ape Sapien Volume 2. Even though it's as thick as the trade paperback Omnis, it's not labeled as an Omnibus. Now we're looking at Ape Sapien Volumes 6 through 8, collecting through here. Now, this is Dark and Terrible, but keep in mind there's also Dark and Terrible Volume 1 and then The Drowning, which is kind of like your Volume 0. So, this is Abe trying to uncover the truth while in the middle of the Hellboy and Hell storyline. Now, if you have to read things in chronological order, I have done a reading order for Hellboy, and I've suggested where to read these particular volumes, because they can get a little bit confusing. This book has 456 pages and retails for $29.94. You have the work in here of Mike Mignola, Max Fiumara, Sebastian Fiumara, and Scott Alley, just to name a few. But it's got some beautiful artwork in here. And there's some Mike Mignola art right there. And it features the character of Ape Sapien kind of doing his own thing. So this is the second volume of Dark and Terrible, and then he's gone AWOL from the BPRD, and this all takes place right around like the beginning of the Hellboy, or not Hellboy, did I say Hellboy on Earth? Hell on Earth story arc that went through the pages of Hellboy and BPRD. And that's why you see Ape Sapien looking a little bit different, because he has mutated, and this is after he got up from his coma. But all the way in the is where you're going to find the extras, like character designs and layouts and short little blurbs about these creatures. And yeah, that's it. I said I was going to fly through fly through these, and I think I kept my word, I think. Well, I guess we'll see when I come to editing. But that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing any of these books, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltzcomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcon at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content and page count of each of these books. Let me know in the comments down below which ones you're picking up, which ones you're interested in, if they were coming out in hardcover format, which ones you wish would be reprinted in hardcover format, and yeah, out of all these books, which ones you've read. Do you like the new colors? They're done by Dave Stewart on the Jeff Darrow and Frank Miller books. And if you have any questions, leave them down below. Smash that like button, and everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.